It was, as he called himself, Mr. Jacob Jakes, that killed someone near to me. But his death marks the end of his reign. Upon mankind's suffering, we will no more pain. I remember the day well when Jacob Jakes lived and died. On the very same day, there on TVs, radios, internet, newspaper, everywhere was his old dead-looking mug, touching a clean floor, sick on his chin. It was the day that they let me out of prison, for killing a man I never killed, a man who, whilst I suffered in prison, continued his life as a new person. A stolen identity of a victim he never killed, in an attempt, no doubt, to start fresh. Now police know that Scott Friedman was killed by Jacob Jakes and not some copycat killer. There on the television was Snerd, my friend, who only visited me once whilst I was inside, to interview about the only book I wrote whilst in there. After my long rehabilitation back to society from my madness, all he cared about was whether I could still publish a hit, and like the nation, he was disappointed by my output and never came visiting again. I walked that day to the place where his body lay in rest. People queued up a mile long to get tickets, to be able to see his putrescent body. And I stood at the end of this line too, to see the man who took my daughter's life, as now we thought and felt that it was safe to be able to approach the monster of a man who terrorized us for years. As I stood over him, I felt no feeling at all. Some I had seen before me crying their eyes out at his death, despite him being such an evil man. How could they shed a tear for someone like him, when they didn't even care about all the innocents that died day by day, and yet this man, now infamous, had more tears than those who deserved it. I've had a sense of anger for this man, who took away my young daughter's life, who outlived her and took a part of my time. As I languished in prison, he enjoyed his existence. I spat in his face, and the guards had the audacity, although belligerently, to escort me away. On my way out, I passed my friend Snerd, who didn't even give me a second glance, but I saw him clearly enter that building, armed with his camera crew and lighting men. I stood outside, watching him as he instructed the camera person to get shots of Jacob Jakes. He even got the lighting guy to take one photograph of him leaning over Jacob, no doubt for another book. He, like the sycophants, was helping to build the memory of the serial killer who had no mercy over the ones he reigned, the ones he snuffed away their lives so that he could enjoy in their endless pain. He started to do his piece, a self-praising introduction, saying how he never believed that I was able to kill him, catching on public sympathy that he cared about me, and saying how he was going to bring the truth of what Mr. Jacob Jakes was doing as Klondike Cracker in his next book, out shortly in all good news agents. If the guards by my side weren't holding me back, I would have ran in there and punched him. But it was all really unnecessary, and now I wish I had not had these thoughts. For he continued his spiel, leaning over Jakes with a beaming, sugary smile as he talked of the history of this mercenary killer. And as he did so, an orderly came running up to the entrance. My guard next to me held him tight, not allowing him in, for he had committed the ultimate sin of jumping the good queue of men, women and children who had come to see the rotting remains of their slaughterer. He was trying to show them something. He had an X-ray in his hand and was babbling about it being made late at night. I pulled the black and white transparency from his hand and looked at the chest cavity of what appeared to be a man and asked him what. It's his. I immediately thought he was another sycophant wanting to catch off Snerd's publicity and get himself some fame and money and throw the X-ray on the floor. And I threw the X-ray on the floor. No, you idiot, look, I got to get in there and warn them. Warn them of what? I said as I picked up the X-ray. The X-ray, see it there in the middle? It's a small incendiary device, a bomb inside him. It's got a timer and everything. He must have planted it inside himself at night when the doctors weren't around. We found a bloody scalpel under his bed, and this was hanging up in the doctor's office, and this too. He handed me something that I didn't have time to look at. I turned around to shout at Snerd, who was leaning over the coffin of the harmless Jacob Jakes. Quick, Snerd, run! Get away from there! Get away! Snerd ignored me. The guards, the orderly, and I began to run into the building, shouting, There's a bomb! A bomb! Snerd carried on his piece to camera. What is wrong with these guys? He's perfectly harmless. He's dead. His killing days are over. Now let's get on with this. Snerd, get away from there. There's a bomb inside him. It's on a timer. Quick! This time Snerd's face changed its expression. Look, I need this story. I'm going to be famous as the man who was close to interviewing Jacob Jakes, and I'm the first to get this footage of the dead Jakes, and I'm going to get it. Now be quiet. I placed my arms out and stopped the orderly and guards from moving further. He's made his choice. And as we turned around and walked back, I heard Snerd laugh and say, "You must think I'm stupid." I pulled out the item the orderly handed me and unscrewed it. It was a newspaper clipping, and as I read it, there was a muffled click sound and an explosion. "You are the last death, the last victim," read the torn-out clipping. I turned around to see the coffin of Jacob Jakes on fire, and Snerd's body blackened on the floor, stationary. Bereft of the sounds of crackling and popping was heard of the wretched body of the killer, whose initials are etched on many a nightmare. J.J. It was as he called himself, Mr. Jacob Jakes, that killed someone near to me, but his death marks the end of his reign. Upon mankind's suffering, we will know more pain.